DuckTalks is part of Res TV's network of podcasts. Check out res.tv for other great podcasts. It's the week of Monday, December 10th, and you're listening to episode 53 of DuckTalks. Hey there, and welcome to DuckTalks. This is going to be a special episode. This episode is something we've looked forward to for 52 episodes. When we first talked about starting a podcast called DuckTalks, we had a few short-term goals. And one of those goals was to have an opportunity to speak with one of our heroes, Tad Stones. And tonight, we're going to have that opportunity. Hey, my name's Mitch. I'm one of your hosts. Joining me this week, as usual, my pals, Pirate Steven and Josh.
Ahoy.
Hey, guys.
Pirate's kind of short there. He's ready to get to Tad.
Let's do it. Let's get dangerous.
Let's get dangerous.
Right.
We want to welcome Tad Stones to the podcast.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. It really is a true joy. We've been longtime fans of Darkwing Duck, and in the last few years, we've started, as our fandom has grown and we started looking into Darkwing, we come to find out you were kind of one of the main influences of that character.
Yep. Sorry, that's my landline, but someone else will get that. in the Vast Stones organization.
Well, glad to hear you're keeping busy.
Yeah. When I say my organization, it's my wife, and I basically work for her, so.
Well, that's not a bad job.
Not at all.
I think most husbands would say the same thing.
I like my job. Well, Tad, we wanted to welcome you to the show. We wanted to take a little bit of time and just ask you a little bit about your career and learn a little more about you. And this is kind of your episode of Duck Talks. We normally review an episode of Ducktales, and I was so thankful that you were able to join us this week because we have a break from episodes.
That's true.
Hopefully
reruns. Thank you, Frank.
Well, that's one of the hard parts about doing this. We originally thought our episodes would be like 30 minutes long, maybe 45, and it's every week we're pushing around an hour, and that was before the original hiatus ended. Once we started having episodes of DuckTales to talk about, we started really having to edit our episodes down.
I think the new DuckTales is a much richer show than the original. I mean, they really do mine the sources of not only Carl Barks, Don Rosa, but they go back to Donald Duck comics, comic strips, the old Donald cartoons, of course, the whole Who Gets Stuck with All the Bad Luck. They've made it into a thing. And not only DuckTales, but they have, as you know by now, the permission, I guess, to use any characters of the Disney afternoon. So the guest shots have not ended.
And we've been on the edge of our seats watching for them and waiting for them. And they've been great. I've really enjoyed seeing everything that they have included and also the stuff that we're waiting for them to include.
Yeah, and I think what people used to talk about them as like mentions of Cape Suzette as breadcrumbs. And I said they're not as Easter eggs. And I said they're not Easter eggs, they're breadcrumbs. That they're all in that universe, and it's a matter of, doesn't mean that you'll get a gummy bear bouncing through Scrooge, McDuck Mansion. But as we've seen, somebody was after gummy berry juice, It's somewhere in their history is the same universe. And maybe there are present day gummies, and maybe they'll eventually get to them. But I think there's a lot of ducks to get through first.
And they've spent a lot of time on the main cast, too. I feel like by the time we got to the halfway, I was reflecting, by the time we got to the halfway point to that winter hiatus that ended up going to summer, we really knew a lot of the characters. And when the show came back, it felt like it really got rolling. And at that point, we went from, beyond just learning the main cast to now building upon that. And then next thing I knew, left and right, here comes these references. And like you said, breadcrumbs, because they did become more. And man, we can't wait to find out what happens with Darkwing.
Yeah, you and me both. The first season really concentrated on Dewey, and this one's going to be on on Louie. So, you'll learn plenty about all the characters, but, I don't know any details of the arcs, but I know that's the concentration of this season, and how it interacts with other ongoing stories is, I'm guessing plenty of episodes will be through Louie's eyes. But you got to realize when they brought the show back, the studio said, or various channels when they were working for different channels, they said they're not bringing them back to do the same show. This is a reboot, and the biggest part of the reboot is the show is about the Duck family, but through the eyes of the kids. So they really had to, I know everybody loves the episode now, but they really had to push, I know, when they did the first Gizmo Duck episode, because it was a Launchpad episode, and they did more character development on Launchpad than I think has been done in any preceding issue, series, or for that matter, issues of comics. So they brought Dewey along there, but he was kind of like, yeah, we have to bring along a kid. So there's plenty of stuff they'd like to wander off, for instance, and do a Darkwing Duck story. But it's DuckTales. It still has to be connected to that central cast in some way. So, which we're still learning about, as you said.
Yeah, we love what they did with Launchpad. I mean, every episode that he's in, even if he doesn't say anything, we're laughing out loud and saying that's our favorite part of the episode.
Oh, I love this version of Launchpad. I used to say that my Launchpad, in other words, Darkwing's Launchpad, instead of being relatively, he wasn't smart. He was basically patterned on loosely on Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China, a guy who sees himself as a hero, but would fire a machine gun into the ceiling and promptly be knocked out by the falling plaster. And he was a terrible pilot. And in my show, I really dropped his IQ. But he was like a fantastic pilot. And now in the new show, it's like he's even dumber. Compared to most inanimate objects, he's dumb. And he's back to being a terrible pilot, and to the extent that, it feels wrong if he lands without crashing. And then they brilliantly tied that motivation into Darkwing Duck, which I loved. I mean, he wasn't just a fan of Darkwing Duck. He based his life on the idea that Darkwing is a guy who never gives up. That's true, but I never consciously described him that way. It was true because that's how we plotted the stories, that he keeps hitting obstacles, and until he learns his lessons, fate doesn't smile on him. But again, the DuckTales crew all grew up with the show like you guys did, and they've internalized it, and this is their version. It truly is a reboot. In other words, no, don't look at the characters to be the same as the old characters. It's, you don't do Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock Holmes by trying to imitate Sean Connery or Roger Moore. It's there. You'll see all the same characters, but obviously the creative people said, oh, this is our take on James Bond. In this case, it's our take on Gizmo Duck, or Webby, certainly. And those two characters are hugely improved by what they decided to do, although based on the core stuff that we did, 25, 30 years ago.
We love what they did with Flintheart Glomgold. He's
fantastic.
So fantastic in this new version.
Because it's always Flintheart Glomgold.
And it always will be.
Anytime there's Launchpad and Glomgold scenes in an episode, we're always debating which was better because it's close. And I really like.
Though, I was going to say, with Launchpad, though, even though Tad was saying that they did make him somewhat dumber, but I think there's something to him with the kind of this secret life where he's almost like a hero in some way. Like in the episode where he goes to and comes back, it kind of looks like Aquaman or their episode of season 1.
The panda.
When he comes back with the panda. There's something going on. And
but those aren't mutually exclusive. Remember, Launchpad introduces himself as, I'm Launchpad. I'm everybody's friend. Well, imagine him being thrown into an underwater world. He's still that outgoing, big-hearted guy who is very and muscles, and that big heart is really attractive to, people who are in trouble, or even beautiful women could be attracted to him because he's so sincere, even if he's a little clueless. So, I'm sure I shouldn't say sure because the guys can always pull something, but I doubt that we're ever going to see the details of those adventures, but it's just a fun spice to add on to, those episodes where they need them for transportation, but they have too many characters in the show already.
Yeah, I've told Matthew Humphreys on Twitter that I am totally on board with him getting an opportunity to write a Launchpad comic where we just get to see the in-between stories of what he was doing, or it doesn't even have to be the ones that's been hinted at so far, just to see him out adventuring like that, because that's what I anticipate is happening.
Well, that could definitely be a comic series for sure, of just somebody. You really need somebody like a Barks who'd say, it really has that feeling of adventure, not just the humor of it, because you really want, again, going back to Big Trouble in Little China, you want that, this is crazy stuff happening. It's real danger. It's real jeopardy. And here's this guy somehow not getting through it effortlessly, but just not giving up, and just always trying to do the right thing. It's just, I don't know, just a fantastic character. I think he's stronger now than he used to be.
Did that crack you up in the season 1 finale when he has the Darkwing Duck bobblehead and he jumps on the top of the plane and he's singing the Darkwing Duck theme song?
Yeah, it was great. No, it was the Launchpad. It was a Launchpad McQuack theme song. If you listen to the lyrics, but it was exactly. He's just not that original with tunes.
Hysterical. And me, Josh, and Mitch all want that bobblehead. We're like, why didn't they make that? We were totally above.
I'm looking at Funko. They've got the figures. They just have to add a spring and a chip. Uh-huh. So I would think it's in their court.
We'd be pushing.
And we can make our own.
Yeah, I've considered that too.
Frankly, I'm shocked that nobody has done it because there's enough recordable chips out there and greeting cards and whatnot. And like I say, the Funko figures are out there right now that it wouldn't take too much effort if you knew what you were doing to come up with something that you can hit and talks.
Yeah, I'm ready to do that. Mind blown now.
There you go.
Yep.
Because and then you put it online and people start throwing money at you, and you say, I just do one a decade, keep it art.
Yeah, so that I can charge $900 for it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, they keep bringing back Darkwing in different ways and mentions and theme songs. I'm sure he's going to have more episodes. And, as people have said to me about Darkwing, I love this, but this disappointed me. And my response is always, look, I'm not on the show, but in watching the show and talking to the guys on the crew, no character gets their story told in a single episode. Every Gizmo Duck is a fantastic example of this, that you had that first episode, you can say, okay, now he's Gizmo Duck, but it was the second appearance where you found out why, because of the way his brain works, he's the only one who can handle that suit. Mm-hmm. That suit, it's not like it's, artificially programmed to meld with his brain. It's like, no, his brain operates on so many levels at the same time. That's the only one that can keep up with the suit. That was, and the story with his mom and everything, that was just, more development, So, and as we see with Dewey going through the year and how his brothers dealt with him, and, even in the Christmas special, you see how Dewey's trying to be off by himself, and again, like he's the only one who's missing his mom. The guys are doing a brilliant job of keeping these characters alive and letting them grow. Where back in the Disney afternoon, that was the opposite of what they wanted us to do. They really wanted these shows, aside from our multi-parters that were more about promotion, things aren't supposed to change. It was supposed to be every show is done in one, and any continuity has to be very loose, until Gargoyles, which went the opposite way.
Mhm.
But you all reset pretty much every 22 minutes.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was easiest with Darkwing because he, you'd think once an anvil drops on his head, he's done, and yet there would be acts 2 and 3 after that. So
right after the commercial.
Yeah. So.
But that's what we loved growing up.
We weren't as organized
it worked.
as. Well, we weren't as organized as the new show, in that I remember visiting the first time and the writers asked me, "How big was your writer's room?" And I was like, "We didn't have a writer's room. We were just trying to get stories out, and we'd talk every once in a while, but there was no whiteboards or even legal pads shared." It was just, pitching premises, talking about them, or I'd get an idea and talk it through with some people. And I don't think I could have a real clear description of the process unless I got all my story editors back together and actually, what do you guys remember? Because I know certain ideas I swear I came up with, and I'm pretty sure, and I've had other people attribute them to me, but then I've heard totally different descriptions from other people about different parts of the show that I was unsure of. But it's like, really? Where is that? Where that came from? Well, I guess it can make sense. So we'll see. We'll see how our brains hold up. But somebody approached me very recently, and they wanted to do a kind of behind the scenes of Darkwing Duck, even if it was just online, to go through every episode and do commentary on it. And it's like, that would require me remembering what was going on.
Probably
and you
a
have
lot
to
of research.
realize we didn't do one episode at a time. We were doing more like 6 or 7, later in the season, when you're doing post-production on one show, premises on another show, outlines on 2 other shows, scripts at various stages, and one getting ready for recording. That was every week. So the idea that we could actually slow down to plot something out or take notes about the development process is ridiculous. I said it would be a very short podcast.
Well,
mostly it would sound like, some political commission where it's like, to the best of my recollection.
right.
Or I do not recall.
And you'll have to check with.
Yes.
Well, and that's something I've wondered about the Disney afternoon. As were you all housed in the same location, like all the shows?
Yeah. I mean, it was a very small.
And so was there like a lot of crossover?
Okay, let's back up a little bit. When I came to Disney, it was 1974. At the time I went to feature animation, the entire feature animation department, not counting ink and paint, because they were still painting cells back then, was 65 people. 65 people to turn out a Disney feature film every 4 or 5 years. So it always started out small, and the company went through all sorts of changes, became a real movie company again, and got into television, TV animation, but we were still very small. So we were in one building. As the season went on, we started spreading out, and maybe we're in 2 buildings, but I think that was, I don't even know if it was still officially the Disney afternoon by the time we were doing that. No, I guess so. I mean, I had to move to another building for Aladdin, I believe, certainly for Hercules. But you never had one show in a location. I slow down as I say that, saying, "Is that right?" I don't think. Yeah. So there's plenty of shows going on, so that especially what was nice that we were not under show contracts; we were under term contracts, meaning you hear I'm signing this contract. This is what you're going to make every year for the next 2 years, but we have an option for another 2 years at this price. And the cool thing about that, depending on your point of view, is that Disney owned everything that all your creative output. So if Greg Weisman wanted me to come in and sit in on a discussion of gargoyles early on, I could do that. It was like, as long as I had time in my schedule, I'd stop in and just be that outsider voice. And Greg did the same thing to us. And that was great, that you wanted the ability to get a fresh point of view at a, producer, director, story editor level where, hey, can you come in? Let me just pitch something to you, and just have a test audience for ideas or concepts or a new show pitch for that matter. So yeah, I mean, we weren't always housed in one place, but in those first few years of Disney Afternoon, I'm pretty sure we were all in one building, on just up the street from Universal Studios, actually.
So there was maybe some overlap with the other shows, with like Tailspin and Rescue Rangers and all that. It was all kind of taking place around you at one time.
Yeah, but I mean, there's really only, aside from any specials going on, when it came to this Disney Afternoon series, a lot of times it was most of the crew went from show to show, so that toward the end of a show, you're always worrying about losing some of your best artists and storyboard people to the next show.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's because you want to start every show. The company wants to start with the strongest people. Mm-hmm. And early on, artists were under term contracts too, which had never been done. Artists weren't even given contracts. But they were carried on and on, from show to show. So yeah, there's overlap in that, depending on who came up with the new show idea. One person would do this, even if, like, Jim Egan and I created Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, and we were told by our boss that I can't have both you guys on the same show, because we were the two creative leads of the department at that time. So I did the show, and then Jim was, gave notes on the show in addition to developing other shows. And actually, and then Tailspin actually would be the one that he went on to develop at that time. And then while he was doing that, I was working on 00 Duck, who became Darkwing.
We wanted to ask, you were talking, because we're also huge fans of Rescue Rangers. We don't talk about it as much because of the whole duck thing, but we bring it up as often as possible, and we're hoping there's some news in the future that might cause us to talk about it a little bit more. But we were talking, and I had heard that Rescue Rangers kind of stemmed, like, it was originally a pitch based on the Rescuers, and it had different characters, and then someone at Disney asked for you to include Chip and Dale. Now, was that your first project at, Rescuers was your first project at Disney, is that right?
Well, yeah, in 74, again, I came to feature animation. So I came 5 months after Ron Clements. And if you know anything about Disney features, Ron Clements, John Musker, done some of the best features, including revitalizing the animation industry with Little Mermaid. And they worked on Great Mouse Detective together, and then Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Princess and the Frog, Treasure Planet, Moana. Anyway, I came in right after Ron and like 2 months ahead of Glenn Keane. So we were all sharing a room for a while. Although Ron people don't know this because he went on into story and then quickly into directing. Ron was fantastic, a fantastic animator. He did a test for, that's how he got ahead, was doing personal tests. He did a test of Cruella de Vil and Jasper out of 101 Dalmatians, and it was fantastic. It was literally good enough to be in the feature film. And that was said by the 9 old men who saw it, not all 9, but most of them who were on the review board looked at it and thought it was fantastic. And Frank Thomas quickly grabbed Ron to be an assistant for, to him, and he would then continue Ron's education. Anyway, so that was back in 1974. That's how small the department was. And then I lost track. I've already said that. So what was the question?
Yeah. So
was there a question?
There was.
Oh, I know what it was. It
Rescuers.
was Rescuers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, after doing my training program that I survived, I became an in-betweener in the Rescuers. I was a terrible in-betweener. I came close to being fired. Would have ended a wonderful career.
What is an in-betweener?
Literally doing the drawings that go in between the other drawings.
That's what I
So
okay.
an animator will do key poses that really set the scene, and I mean the main poses of a character acting. Then you'll have an assistant and or breakdown guy who will put in a few more drawings to really, following the timing, the arcs that an animator would draw on the scene. And then the in-betweener is the grunt work that does the slower the motion, the more drawings you need for that action. Fast action is more fun. Anyway, it's a special skill that I lacked. And it wasn't until years later that it was a mental block. And suddenly I said, oh, that's what everybody was talking about. It was really a conceptual problem on my part. And I said, oh, they should have said it. They described it like this. And I realized, oh, that's exactly how they described it. I was just bad not getting it.
Oh, I have those moments all the time.
Yeah. Back to the Rescue Rangers. So I was on the Rescuers as the first thing, then moved into story and took a detour, designed rides for Imagineering and did a little time in TV, and then was there at the first meeting about TV animation and back to features and then back to TV animation. So actually, Rescuers was pitched without any detail, saying, Rescuers was designed as a series, meaning a series of books. Can we do it as a TV show? And Jeffrey said, no, we're already doing a sequel. And he said, those movies, those sequels finance the experimentations and the bigger things you want to try that aren't so surefire. Which really didn't take hold in a major way until Jeffrey was gone and Pixar started making sequels. And now Disney, of course, makes sequels too. But generally the sequels, and I'm not talking about the video things, I'm talking about, the Toy Story movies,
the live action now.
The internet, live action, that's a whole different game. But in animation, all the, those sequels are usually pretty good and in some place sometimes surpass the original. And they're certainly well loved. Anyway, that was the idea that we couldn't do it. And we would also, we would pitch shows with just a few lines, and a pitch by Ken Kuntz and David Weimers, a writing team at the time. They basically had just a one-line pitch, and it was a play on a popular show, Miami Vice. We pitched Miami Mice, and immediately the guys took to it. When I say the guys, I'm talking about Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Richard Frank, who was in charge of television at the time. They expected us to do great shows. But if there was a hook to the name or the high concept that would draw an audience, or an audience might think something called Miami Mice is funnier, they'll say, well, what are they going to do with that? It's like, they expect that could draw a bigger audience to find your great show, and it would have a better chance of being a success, which is exactly why I was told to develop 00 Duck. Anyway, Rescuers, they just said no to. We pitched Miami Mice, and they said, make this your Rescuers. The first Miami Mice Bible and script was by myself, Jim Magon, and Carl Gears. Carl notably did the Dungeons and Dragons show on Saturday morning, and famous to the Disney money bin, brought Winnie the Pooh to television, and did a fantastic job of it. Anyway, the three of us did the Miami Mice script. I don't know if we were told to change the name or we just said, look, we're never going to get away with this. Let's dodge the bullet now. But we changed it to Metro Mice. I saw some of the pitch artwork recently, and it was like, they're holding guns. It's like, I'm not talking about guns with, rubber darts in the front. I'm talking about, Glocks. It was kind of a gritty, I don't know how gritty it was, but it was basically Hill Street Blues done with mice. The villain, it's still comedy. Let's put it this way. I say that, but comedically, I know one of the characters kind of a Bill Murray type. And the villain was Fat Cat, pretty much as he ended up sounding and looking, in the Rescue Rangers. Anyway, probably because of that, we just felt like actually using a police station is a bad template to use, in that you constantly have to take police crimes and find how do you translate that into the mouse world, since they don't have jewelry stores. They don't, how many things can we rob? We can't do really violent stuff. So we looked for more of a general adventure kind of thing. So Miami Mice begat Metro Mice, begat the Rescue Rangers, and it was just more of a general group of adventurers, and the lead was Kit Colby, who wore the same aviator's jacket. His name was Kit. We don't throw things away. And Gadget was in it. Monterey Jack basically was in it, but he was named Billabong, and he was a kangaroo rat. Zipper, I believe, was in it, just as he is. Like I say, Gadget was in it, and then there were other characters, Camille the Chameleon and Chirp Sing, a cricket, and they rode a nearsighted bald eagle. So that was the Rangers. That's what got pitched to Michael and Jeffrey, and that was the same meeting where I pitched Robo Duck and Space Duck and Bubba Duck, and I actually called Bubba, but even though he was basically Caveman Duck. They didn't like the Alien Duck. They loved Robo Duck because RoboCop had come out the summer before. I even named him Fenton Crackshell. Did the first drawing, and but really that character was developed by, again, Ken Kuntz and David Weimers and the other editors on DuckTales, and really turned him into a character and gave him a mother and all that stuff. And somewhere along the line changed his name to Gizmo Duck. And if you doubt the veracity of that story, take a look at the R that's on his chest. And that was only a couple of years ago that I realized, wait, they kept the R? Did the department get a memo when they decided to change the name, or did no one follow through, or was it already in production? I mean, I would have just said, yeah, the first few episodes let them have an R. Let's just change it to a G, or,
I remember talking about that with friends growing up. I remember there being an R, and we would talk about it's because of RoboCop. So the first time I heard you talk about that, I thought it was very interesting. And I love that in the new show, they actually did turn it around and make it a G.
Yeah, they literally turned the R around and just kind of stretched it a little bit to be a G. Anyway, in that same meeting, we pitched this Rescue Ranger show, and they really liked the show, but they said, we don't feel anything for your lead character. We just don't like him. And I stupidly said, well, is it just because you're not familiar with him? Stupid, because I just pitched all the other characters that were also unknown. And they pointed to Robo Duck and Bubba Duck. and said, no, we got those guys in just a few sentences. It's a great show. It's just not a home run. Anyway, the meeting went on, and we went down. DuckTales was already a huge success, and it was like, well, what other the classic characters can we do? We started with Mickey, and Michael was very protective of Mickey. He said, no, we're not touching him yet until you really can, do him justice. Donald was already in DuckTales, sort of. He was hard to animate, mostly because of his waddling, because the weakest we were is when we were trying to imitate features, yes, we did some great spin-off shows of features, but, if you design for television's limitations and for your budget, you end up with something that works better, Gummy bears, they're full-figured, full animation, but you're not mentally comparing them to, those gummy bears that were done in the 40s, whereas Donald, you're always going to be seeing Donald moving around in those old cartoons or interstitial material or whatever. Anyway, they say, okay, Donald's in there. He's kind of hard. Let's keep him where he is right now. They got to Goofy. They say, definitely. Goofy's always been an everyman in addition to just being Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, part of the trio. And that began a development with Goofy that went on and on and on, usually around a detective or a adventurer of some sort. But he went into development that finally hit years later. Anyway, we weren't going to do Pluto. You're not going to do a 65-episode series about a dog. And as soon as we said Chip and Dale, Michael Eisner said, put those guys in that show. And Jeffrey said, home run. Mm-hmm. And that now, once you have two leads instead of one lead, you have to determine their interaction. And that's just going to take up time. You now have two guys. And so we didn't need all these other characters. So we got rid of the eagle, and Gadget created the Ranger plane. We got rid of the cricket and the chameleon. And it just seemed like, okay, now we're down to a number that we can handle. The only mistake we probably did was, many mistakes, but conceptually a mistake was with Zipper, by having him not talk and be so small and not strong, really limited how we could use him in a show. I mean, the writers had a hard time writing for him. It really got to the point where we were telling the storyboard guys, wherever you can give Zipper a little piece of action, go ahead and pitch it, draw it up. Had we said, he's a super strong fly, which we had him do things from time to time, then he could do, he can still be silent, but he can have a real role because of how strong he is, as opposed to being a spy and coming back and saying a bunch of squeakies things to them that doesn't help your,
that has to be translated to the audience.
Exactly, yeah. So that takes up more time. Time to hear squeak, and then time to hear somebody say what he was saying.
Does that where the episode then comes from, where Zipper gets big because he's like really weak, and so they kind of make fun of him, and then he like becomes like a giant because of there was a ray that makes him very big.
Possibly. I have to say this. One, I was taken off the show. I think I did like 40 plus episodes, maybe 45 episodes, something like that, which is fine. Probably saved my life. Although I consider Darkwing Duck more my show. Rescue Rangers, I did so much work on stream of consciousness. There's somehow probably more of me in that show. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it stands to reason, because let's put it this way, my day off was Sunday, and I only went into work for 4 hours. Saturday was 8 hours, and all the rest were insane hours. So, yes, like I said, I would have really been because it was so stupid. There were only two of us, myself and Bryce Malick, being the story editors, and we had 3 production crews. And somebody should have said, hey, you need at least 3 story editors to handle that load, and probably 4. But they're saying, I get the feeling that the management was going, I don't know, let's see if they can do it. It saves a bunch of money. But it literally killed us. I mean, there was things like scripts were handed in. I would rewrite acts 1 and 2. They'd be handed in on Thursday. I'd rewrite acts 1 and 2 and write the act 3. Didn't always take a credit. It was just moving through. And then ultimately, after I was taken off the show, they were trying to do something different with things. They rewrote the pilots, which really helped it. But then the final episodes, they'd used up so much time. They actually requested talkier episodes that they could move through the production process faster. So by that time, I was probably playing with ducks.
So how many episodes were completed before the show started to air? I mean, it sounds like there was quite a few already done.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had to remember, everything's based on 13 weeks. I don't know why. It's probably from a season being 26 weeks long, and they're going to replay it twice on Saturday morning, so that's 26 episodes. So you do 13 episodes, and then the second season you might do 13 or just 10, and then you might do 8. That's how Saturday morning ran at the time. There were only 3 networks back then.
Because you were building up reruns?
Yeah, basically the networks felt like kids could just put up with more reruns. It was more about freshening the show as opposed to building the audience anymore. They didn't think in those terms, or, again, they were not pushing for continuity. In fact, they would rather have you do 2 11 minutes than 1 22-minute. So Gummies, we had always fought for the 22-minute episodes, which were more mythology based, but they were cheaper. You didn't have to design. Let's say you have an 11-minute episodes and you go to a dragon world, and then you have another 11 minutes and you go to the magical talking trees place. Well, you have to do all those layouts of Dragon World and all the mythical talking trees, and it takes all of that to fill up 22 minutes because you did 2 stories. Whereas if you do 22 minutes about the Dragon World, okay, I'm doing the same number of layouts, but they're lasting for 22 minutes because you're staying in one place telling a story. So there's a lot of practical stuff like that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting half the story and twice the effort.
Well, you're not getting, you get the story that's designed for 11 minutes, but it's twice the effort, basically, for the short. Whereas the 22, it's, again, you've got room to breathe, and you can really tell a richer story. I always rather do 22s. It's just my preferred length.
Right.
And now, again, looking at DuckTales, not only do you have the 22 minutes, you have, stories that are lasting several episodes, including one overall arc. And that overall arc is affected by the stories of the various characters and where they are in their development, to be part of the big finale. And even then, at the end of, the first season of DuckTales, you finally find out something that was discovered in the very first episode, and that leaks onto season 2 and becomes a huge thing in season 2.
I guess that's why, for us as kids, Justice Ducks and the Fearsome Five were such a big deal.
Yeah,
because we weren't getting any continuity, and then there they were all together.
Yeah, I don't think it was continuity. I mean, it was a different world, but I think it's just that thing where, wait a minute, I love Superman, I love Batman. They're going to be together in one comic? Wow, I want that. Or the Fantastic Four are going to meet the X-Men? Sweet. There was a time where that was a huge deal, even within the same company. I was collecting Marvel in their early years, and they were sweating out doing a 2-parter. It was like, do you want? And then they got up to 3-parters, and a lot of fans hated that. They wanted, they want to put down 12 cents, damn it, and get a full story. And the idea that it would be 3 issues long, which move ahead 5 years or whatever it was when Chris Claremont is doing the X-Men, telling these stories that just are never ending because one bleeds into the next while you start the third. So I just think that adds to the richness now of what you see on cartoon shows. Gravity Falls is a great example of it too.
Yeah.
So was there any inspiration then for Justice Ducks in the Furious Five?
The biggest inspiration, you got to realize Darkwing Duck started as a spy show, which was not exciting to me. And the luckiest thing happened is that instead of taking me off the development after I pitched it, Jeffrey made me redo it again. And I had to come up with a more interesting way of doing a spy show. And it kind of went to the pulp ideas of Doc Savage, who had a team of associates. Each one had a specialty. I say, oh, well, that's how we can kind of build a secret agent team. And that mutated toward Darkwing Duck, even though he's called 00. And we lost the rights to use that name. And that let me get rid of the secret agent stuff. And what I loved was the comics I grew up with before Marvel Comics, which these goofy Silver Age comics with, Jimmy Olsen turning into a giant turtle, or Elastalad, or Superman's eating 10 million pies, or the world will end, whatever it was. And a lot of Darkwing episodes were like half-remembered comic book covers of The Flash. So the inspiration of Justice Ducks is definitely the Justice League. I wasn't trying to say, oh, this will be Hawkman, this will be Aquaman, but it was, what do we have in terms of heroes already in existence? And it's like, oh, we had these characters that we could then pull together as pre-existing characters that we could bring into a team. The villains are easy. It was just a matter of which are fun, favorite villains that we're going to pull together and which work best off each other.
What do you think of Liquidator's new look in the new DuckTales?
It's funny. I don't know how you get beefy with water, but he's small. It's funny. That sequence was storyboarded by Ben Ballesteri, who loved Darkwing Duck and who then worked for me on my later shows. I don't know whether it was Hercules and all that after or when he came on. I'd have to look that up, which is way too much effort. Anyway, Ben's a fantastic artist. He's also a producer on Tangled. Being a producer on an animated show is a full-time job. But my impression is like lives were threatened if he wasn't going to get a chance to storyboard this little Darkwing thing. You don't, especially on DuckTales, the way they storyboard, it's more about what you're communicating than the prettiness of the storyboard. Having said that, Ben does gorgeous, these are like finished comic book things, and it's been online. I don't know the easy way to find it, but he posted it without sound back on Facebook. Anyway, he basically did such a great job. He added all sorts of gags, the little banana brain toy box, the shush flag, the Grislikov billboard. The rat catcher was not part of the description in the script, but he threw the rat catcher into the background of the scene where they're talking about how the guy did his own stunts. They were so beautiful, they just used what Ben did as a design. And to me, then I love what he did with the Liquidator, because all the villains, kind of as different as they are, have kind of a similar silhouette. They all tend to be lanky, thin guys. Liquidator being muscles is more the classic, oh yeah, you got to have your muscle guy. And he shrank Quackerjack, which was brilliant. I was like, oh, we should have done that. It was just, to me, it was fantastic. So yes, I love the look of what he did, but that's all one guy, and then they basically, did a couple of nips and tucks to make sure they fit into the DuckTales design scheme. And Darkwing himself was designed by Sean Jimenez. Is that his last name? I always do that. It? Always second guess. Yeah, okay.
I second guess them all the time. Everybody's.
I do it all the time because it's like I remember going to grade school with a girl, Karen Jimenez, and I always think I'm flashing back to that, and then I question, what's his name? Yeah. But
the characters
Sean
transitioned
forgives
well.
me. What can I say?
I can't believe how good a job Keith Ferguson does with the voice of Megavolt. He sounds just like Dan Castellaneta. I couldn't even. I had to look it up. I thought it was Dan when I first heard it.
Yeah, we were shocked.
I mean, one of the criticisms of it, because they showed it to me early on, it wasn't a harsh criticism. I just said, well, the only thing wrong with it at all is Liquidator's personality is all about his talking, and he doesn't talk. And they said, yeah, we ran out of budget, because that was like suddenly these extra voices. And the way voice casting works is you hire the actor, and for that same payment, they're allowed to do, or you're allowed to have them do, 3 voices. So whenever you have people across the street saying something or background characters and all that, it's like you divvy up those voices amongst the actors. So you're not using extra money. So yes, Disney makes a lot of money. It doesn't mean that any of these shows have unlimited budgets, because they do not.
That episode, it was funny because we had started to anticipate that was going to be the episode Darkwing showed up in, and it was just pure speculation on our part. We were convinced it was going to be this episode. We were going to get Gizmo Duck, and we were going to get Darkwing. And
well, it was amazing how much they crammed into that. But what really made it work is that that's where you find out that Launchpad's character development is wrapped around this, old TV character, this Adam West guy.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah, Jim did a great job on that scene as well.
Well, of course. And that's So yes, he plays Jim Starling very well. A lot of people were calling him Jim Sterling, and it's like, no, it's DuckTales. So you look for the bird pun, and it's from Jim Cummings to Jim Starling.
Yeah, I think that was one of the episodes that Disney Now, the app, released a little early. It came out at like midnight, and Pirate messaged me. I think we might have, I can't remember. There was something, but we had been talking late into the night, and I had just gone to bed, and I got a message saying, it's up, and you're not going to believe what's at the very beginning. So, of course, I had to get up and watch it.
Yeah. Well, it was brilliant of them, or at least very smart of them, to do that first thing, because even if you had it spoiled that Darkwing's going to be in this episode, it doesn't ruin anything, because it's literally the first shot. It's the first scene. So, I mean, again, the guys did a fantastic job.
And it's a good setup.
Hear more about them.
It's a good setup for Gizmo Duck, too, because you've got the difference. Launchpad's and Dewey are talking about, wait, he doesn't have any fancy gadgets or CGI. And he's like, no, he did all of his stunts. And it was really cool setting up Gizmo Duck for that episode as well.
Yeah. I mean, these guys don't do anything lightly. They don't, for instance, there was somebody had a episode where they needed a plant expert, and they said, we'll use bushroot, or before he was mutated or something like that. And it's like, Frank said, no, you can't, because even if he never gets to do bushroot, on the off chance he does, he's got stories. They don't bring back anybody without saying, this will be his backstory, this is how we'll introduce him like this, and then if we get a chance to do another season, we'll do this twist on him, and the third season we'll do something else. And that goes for just about everybody who gets animated on that show. So they're very careful about all that stuff, and they have plans for it all.
It was amazing about, so it was like a 1.5-minute scene with Darkwing, and the amount of Darkwing hype that was created just from that one scene, it blew my mind. I'm like, man, we need to get Sylvania and Sparrow on those comics again, and like Darkwing hasn't been as popular in like 20 years. We need more Darkwing.
Yeah, well, I don't know that Disney is as successful as DuckTales is. I don't know that Disney TV animation is in the business of revamping the old shows. That they're supposed to come up with new shows. Like, I'm really excited about Owl House. That's coming and in development. Everything I've seen on it looks just amazing. But that's, you could end up with a huge hit, a new hit, rather than, let's do something else with Bonkers or Gizmo or not Gizmo, but, or Tailspin or Rescue Rangers even. However, like I said, DuckTales has permission to use all of that. So I hope the guys just go nuts and, bring that stuff back, as long as they, and again, I trust them completely. They'll keep it focused on the right characters, and yet, we'll let those other characters appear, or their influence. Again, like the Gummy Bears things, the gummies didn't show up except in silhouette. But they got a storyline out of it, and it doesn't mean in their time traveling adventures or whatever that they couldn't meet those characters or their descendants, which would be the logical thing to do. So it would be great. I would love a Darkwing spin-off if those guys got to do it, because I know it would be handled right. But, maybe he just becomes a DuckTales character. So far that's what he is. I caution fans. I say, it is DuckTales, though. Mm-hmm. It's not Darkwing. I mean, Frank and Matt have all sorts of ideas of what they'd want to do with that character. And if they get to do it in DuckTales, it's going to be kind of slow, because it has to be woven in and around everybody else's story. So.
I was watching some San Diego Comic-Con panel that they had for DuckTales, and a little boy was asking when Chip and Dale was going to be added to DuckTales.
Yeah. At the beginning, they were told you can use anything you want except Chip and Dale because of the movie. But they keep asking, I know, and I haven't heard anything from the movie or about the movie since it was announced. So at a certain point, it's not like, oh, this cartoon show does a scene of, or does an episode that has these chipmunks in it, and now suddenly all other chipmunks be the same way. Because right now I think there is a Chip and Dale show on Disney Channel or Playhouse Disney Junior or something. All I know is when there's a show with Mickey's Roadster Racers, or I should know this because friends of mine are working on it, but that they have a little, short subject in it. So it doesn't mean like they can't do the Rescue Rangers now, because they can. So just like we did.
Yeah, we're hoping that rumored live action Rescue Rangers is going to happen at some point. We would love that.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect medium to me, in that it would be nice that they don't fall into the trap, or that live action often does, where it's really the story about the live action people. It would be nice to make it the Rescue Rangers, but using CG in a live action world is perfect, because they are supposed to be taking the crimes that fall through the cracks, or sometimes the things that they solve on their level have a huge effect in the human world. Sure, Professor Nimnol can be a live action guy, or any of the other human characters, but I would love to see it focused on those animal characters, not with him, have them be secondary characters to a live action guy. But that's just fears based on nothing. They could just be as likely to do it well. And even after it was announced, I did trade a couple of emails with the director. It's like he had another movie in between that movie and developing Rescue Rangers. So who knows? Who knows where it is? Movies take much longer to get made and developed than anybody realizes.
Well, that's how DuckTales came on, the reboot came on my radar. I was looking into the Rescue Rangers movie, and that's when I first came across the news that DuckTales was being rebooted. So it was exciting. I was really hoping to get more information about the movie. Hopefully, I hope it's still somewhere in production or pre-production, I guess.
Well, basically what happened, because for a while people were trying to start an internet a letter to say that I should be involved in some way. And it was like, guys, stop. I said, all that's happened is a guy who's a huge Rescue Rangers fan, just like you guys, is also a director who has a deal with a film company, Mandeville Films, I think it was, who has a deal with Disney. So that Rescue Rangers fan said, hey, I've got to deal with this company who works with Disney. I'm going to pitch them my Rescue Rangers idea. The film company thought it was kind of cool. Let's pitch it to Disney. Disney thought, hey, this is worth developing. That was it. And somehow that got, leaked out there, and people expected it in the theaters the next summer. And I was like, no, it's the guy has an interesting take on the Rescue Rangers, whatever it is. And, that scripts go, movies go through lots and lots of scripts quite often. I think the director was going to write the script or co-write the script. And since he had a movie after that, that's going to take up his time. Mm-hmm. So who knows where that is. But meanwhile, it's not like the DuckTales guys. I mean, you could say, no, you're not allowed to do anything from the Disney afternoon, and they would still have a billion stories to do. Because that's just sure. What they are.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really like about the show is that even though there's these, I'm going to quit calling them Easter eggs now and call them breadcrumbs. Even though there's these breadcrumbs, even without them, it would be a great show. I mean, it is a amazing show that I love, and I really enjoy sharing it with my family. And it's a show that all of us, me, my wife, my daughters, we sit down and we watch it together every Saturday. And it's just a great time. And of course, there's things that I laugh at that I have to explain to them a little bit later, but they're laughing along with me. And even, they don't need to know all that information to enjoy it. That's what I like about the show.
Well, I think that's the best Disney entertainment is literally, it was started as family entertainment. And it meant exactly that there was something in it for the whole family. As opposed to, this is something that will babysit your kids.
Right.
I think the cool thing, I love that my kids are excited about it, just as excited about it as I am, and they're wanting to go back and check out the episodes that I watched of the classic shows during my childhood. So it's kind of a circle of life thing there. I love that I get to share that with them, and we're going back and checking out the classic stuff too.
Yeah. It's like watching a Sherlock Holmes show or a James Bond and saying, wait, there were Bonds before this, or Robin Hood. It's like Robin Hood is constantly being rebooted. So yeah, it's just a fun thing to share, and it's like, you grow up to be a nerd where you debate which is the best Sherlock Holmes, with other nerds, and the Sherlock Holmes Club. I'm sure there is one.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion with Tad Stones half as much as we did. It really was a dream come true. We've been looking forward to having an opportunity to interview Tad ever since we first talked about doing Duck Talks as a podcast. And he was phenomenal. The conversation was great. We had a good time talking with him, and honestly, it goes on for another hour. And I'm afraid you're going to have to wait till next week to hear the second half. That's a good thing, because we had actually planned on taking a break next week. Some of us weren't available, and it just was going to be too difficult. And looking at our schedules, it just didn't make sense to try and make an episode happen. But now that we have another hour, I'll just release that next week. I did have a couple of things I wanted to bring up since this episode is an interview with Tad Stones. We didn't cover news and duck merch and things like that. There's not a lot of news about the DuckTales. Nothing has been released to indicate how long the hiatus may be. We are expecting it to last until about mid-January. Should have heard that. I think that was in the first part. If not, it's in the second part of this interview. Other items that I wanted to make sure I pointed out, we are seeing images of more DuckTales Disney Store plush. That looks like that's something that is happening. It does not look like it's fan-made, so expect to see more about that as soon as we can find more information. Additionally, the DuckTales Collection DVD, the cover and details have been released. And if you haven't seen this online, it looks like it's the first 3 volumes that have previously been released on DVD, but they're packaged together and they're $19.99. If you don't have these yet, it's a pretty good deal. If you have a couple of them, maybe you should just find that 3rd volume. We are a little disappointed that it does not appear... It just doesn't. It doesn't include the 4th volume, which is still an exclusive for members of the Disney Movie Club. Hopefully that gets released soon for the rest of us to purchase, or you find someone who's a member who can get it for you. But I think that's it. Check out DuckTalks.com. That's our blog where we keep up with DuckTales and Disney afternoon news throughout the week. You can also follow us on Twitter for up-to-date information. That's at DuckTalks. Don't forget, you can listen to the episodes now on YouTube. Search for DuckTalks on YouTube. You should be able to find us. Josh has been working on those. But I think that's going to do it for this week. Until next time, stay glom golden. Later, everyone.